So as I was putting this together, this is Sunday, January 12th, 2025, I was really struck by the idea of codependence between appeasers and oppressors. And you might see that through these 7 big stories today. So let's look at the first. First, we have a student explaining why he has friends out in the streets for 45 nights in a row in Georgia. In Georgia, they're out there, they're trying to stop what's going on. They wouldn't be out there on the streets unless the oppressors were doing what they were. Now, I'm not saying that the protesters in Georgia need the oppressors, but one is directly related to the other. We cannot live under dictatorship, in oligarchy, and poverty. They took our country and they're now taking money from our budget. In Georgia, every 6th child is starving. So the Georgians are still out there in the streets. Now, they're also out in the streets in Slovakia. Over 15,000 protesters are in Bratislava holding banners and chanting slogans, accusing Fico of dragging the country toward Russia after he met with Putin last month amid a gas dispute with Ukraine. This is according to Reuters. Quote, Slovakia is Europe. We are not Russia. And Slovakia stands with Ukraine. Enough of Russia. Shame. So these protesters are out there in force. But again, they're out there because of the oppressor. And then there's a tangle between Fico and Russia, who kind of need each other in a symbiotic relationship as well. Now let's look a little bit more about this. Pro-Russian Slovak members of parliament fly to Moscow and blame Poland for airspace denial. Poland's like, nope, you're not going over our country. A group led by nationalist member of parliament is in Russia to discuss gas supplies post-Ukraine transit. Poland denied their overflight request, forcing a detour through Germany. Ukraine condemns the visit, calling it a step toward legitimization of Russian aggression. And that is what's going on with that. Germany allowed them to do it. Poland did not. I wonder why Germany allowed it. Fico accused Zelensky of begging and blackmailing European leaders for support. So Fico, as you know, went to meet with Putin, and then he was kind of gone for a while in Vietnam in an expensive suite, and then he was striking back at Zelensky. This is Fico saying, Zelensky, goes around Europe just begging and blackmailing others, asking for money, he said. Fico said that Slovakia could halt its humanitarian aid to Ukraine, cut or cancel social benefits for Ukrainian refugees, and cease emergency electricity supplies to Ukraine. He also suggested using Slovakia's veto power over EU decisions as leverage against Kyiv. Like, we'll just not let you into the EU. It has to stop, he said, and he added that he was sometimes fed up with Zelensky. Fico then described Russia as a reliable energy partner, stating Russia has never deceived us, unlike Ukraine. Well, I beg to differ with that, because if you look back not too long ago in your history, when you were Czechoslovakia, you were invaded by the Russians, as were 4 other Warsaw Pact countries, right? So, I don't know. I don't think you have a leg to stand on there. Zelensky's firing back at the offensive remarks made by pro-Russian Slovak Prime Minister Fico. He said this: It's good that Slovakia's Prime Minister Fico has finally returned from his vacation at a luxurious hotel in Vietnam and is now in Bratislava. For him personally, it must be challenging switching from living in luxury to now trying to fix his own mistakes. It was an obvious mistake for Fico to believe that his shadowy schemes with Moscow could go on indefinitely. We offered our assistance to the people of Slovakia during their adaptation to the absence of Russian gas transit, but Fico arrogantly refused. Like, that was interesting. They refused in Transnistria too, when the Moldovans were trying to help them. Many in Europe warned him that doing nothing and waiting was not an option. Now he's resorting to PR, lies, and loud accusations to shift the blame away from himself onto someone else. But the real problem is that he bet on Moscow, not on his own country, not on a united Europe, and certainly not on common sense. From the beginning, it was a losing bet. We hope that further diversification of energy supply sources in Europe, cooperation with the European Commission, and the implementation of President Trump's policy to increase American gas supplies to the continent will help address the challenges caused by the short-sightedness of certain European figures. Okay, so that's where they are in that. But Fico's weird codependent need to be getting Russian supplies and being related to, same with Hungarian Prime Minister Orban, being dependent on Putin. I just don't understand what the connection or why. Okay, let's shift gears to the next big story. Venezuela's Maduro begins his new term as the U.S. raises its arrest bounty. There's a bounty on Maduro's head. Bogota, Colombia, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was sworn into office for a third consecutive term on Friday, and most people seem to think that it was a fraudulent election. On Friday, not only did the Biden administration issue new financial sanctions on 8 officials from Maduro's government, they also increased the reward for information leading to Maduro's capture and arrest from 15 million to 25 million. There's a reward for capturing Maduro, 25 million. Maduro was charged with narco-terrorism in 2020 by U.S. prosecutors who accused him of backing T Group in Colombia and facilitating cocaine shipments to the United States. Like, he's a bad guy all the way around. Gonzalez, who won the election, is in Argentina, and he's kind of near, but can't get there without losing his life. And Maduro followed Hugo Chavez, who was also a bad guy, but not surprisingly, backed by the Russians. Speaker of the Russian Duma, Volodin, traveled to Caracas this week to congratulate the newly re-elected Nicolas Maduro, who was sworn in as president for his third term on Friday. Despite widespread allegations of vote manipulation, the Venezuelan dictator will hold on to power once again. During his visit, Volodin emphasized that Russian MPs were present in Venezuela as international observers and can readily confirm the election's legitimacy. Really? The Russians are confirming election legitimacy? That's just one of the craziest things that I've read for a long time. All right, there's a picture collage here showing this collage features photographs of Putin alongside Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi, who was overthrown, former Gerdes President Aliyev, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, who was also overthrown during the Tulip Revolution, the current president of Venezuela, Maduro, a runaway former Ukrainian president, Yanukovych, and most recently ousted Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. Yeah, I mean, he just seems to like all the other dictators. He gets along swimmingly with them. All right, now, what about peace talks? The ISW says that Putin maintains maximalist demands for Ukraine's isolation and NATO withdrawal. Russia claims openness to diplomacy with Trump, but maintains pre-invasion demands for Ukraine's capitulation, something that Zelensky just simply cannot possibly agree to, and Putin knows that, and so Putin's doing that, I think, because he doesn't actually want peace. Now, Switzerland is ready to host a summit, a Putin-Trump summit, offering its as a neutral ground for peace talks. Well, Bern won't take the initiative. It has informed all policies of this availability. Now, Trump has hinted in preparations, and Russia appears to be receptive. Who knows how something like this will play out? Okay, Michael McFaul talking about how the ISW assessment is right. The ISW continues to assess that no negotiations will result in meaningful or sustainable peace as long as Putin remains committed to pre-war demands for full Ukrainian capitulation and the weakening of NATO. But again, that's intentional in my estimation. I could be wrong, but I don't think that Putin actually wants peace. He wants to keep going, and this is a way of keeping going by saying, yes, I really do want this, but they have to agree to this, and they're not going to be able to. Now, while that's going on, listen to this. The Baltics should belong to Russia. This is according to a Russian member of parliament, deputy head of the defense committee of the Duma, who said that the Baltics should belong to Russia. In particular, he claimed that Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, I've been there multiple times, was rightfully Russian, as it was part of the Russian Empire. Well, yeah, but that you could also say that Russia belongs to Mongolia because it was part of the Mongolian Empire just as easily. And Lithuanians don't seem to think that that's a really good idea. The deputy also noted that the Suwalki Gap could be useful for Russia as it would provide convenient supply routes through Kaliningrad region. That's on the border of Poland and Lithuania between Kaliningrad and Belarus. He urged the Lithuanian authorities to hold their tongues, adding that the Lithuanian army would not withstand a confrontation with Russia for even a single day. Well, that's what the Lithuanians are worried about, is that there is the potential for greater confrontation with Russia. That's what all the Baltic states are upset about, and rightfully so concerned about their borders. Russia has become a country hated and feared by all its neighbors. It is unfamiliar with the language of culture and civilization. Its only method of communication is violence. Yeah, they seem to have only one setting. They're either okay or they're full-on nuke. Let's just take over and, yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, if that's not enough to prove the case, Ambassador Keelan, all these fears that Russia is going to conquer more territory in Europe through the Baltics and Ukraine are nonsense. Well, wait, which is it? Is it this guy or is it this guy? Which is it? And he goes on to say, it's just used to scare the population of Europe, to scare the public. Now, he's saying that, but he also, there was a reader's note to this, Andre Klein also made the same claim to members of parliament directly prior to the war in Ukraine. No, it's all just nonsense. They did say that kind of thing. No, the Americans are just trying to scare you. So which is it, again? And since you lied in the past, we can't tell that you're not going to be lying right now. Okay. According to Italian Prime Minister Meloni, Russia is bogged down in Ukraine and has captured only 0.06% of Ukrainian territory. That's less than 1%, 0.6% of Ukrainian territory in the past year, dismantling the narrative that Russia has already won. Meloni also predicts that Trump will not abandon Ukraine. Okay, so that 3-day war, it's now at about 3 years at this point. And in December of 2022, Russia controlled 17.4% of the territory. And after 2 years with extremely important losses, Russia controls 18% of Ukrainian territory, plus that they're up by 0.06%. So that's less than 1% over all that time with all that loss. And she concluded by saying that on the conditions of peace, I did say it already, that Trump can be a person who can move forward in the solution. I think yes, but I don't foresee U.S. disengagement, said Meloni. And she just met with him. Trump and Meloni seem to get along very well, and we'll see how that plays out. Now, the Biden administration, next big story, has just sanctioned a lot of the shadow fleet vessels. The latest sanctions are going to cause a lot of disruption in Russia's oil trade. 160 additional tankers have been sanctioned. In the past, U.S. tanker sanctions have turned most of their targets into scrap metal. Okay, so you can see this in this chart that there's a significant jump now in January of 2025. Okay, now, but I want you to hear Biden talking about what's going on. Biden says that Ukraine can defeat Russia with the right support in the United West. But what's going on? Why is it going so slow? Well, I want you to hear him now, and then I'm going to show you a clip of him talking in 2022. This is Biden now.
I had a long talk with Zelensky today. And I think that as long as we continue to keep Western Europe united as it relates to Ukraine, that there is a real chance that the Ukrainians can prevail, because the cost to Russia is incredibly high.
Now, he's not wrong. The cost to Russia is incredibly high. Now, here is Biden talking back in 2022. Note the differences in his speech.
Will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia.
You said that Russia would be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. Are you saying that a minor incursion by Russia into Ukrainian territory would not lead to the sanctions that you have threatened? Or are you effectively giving Putin permission to make a small incursion into the country?
Good question. That's how it did sound like, didn't it? The most important thing to do, big nations can't bluff, number one. Number two, the idea that we would do anything to split NATO, which would have a profound impact on profound impact on one of Putin's objectives is to weaken NATO, would be a big mistake.
Okay, so that was Biden in 2022. There's a big difference in Biden 2022 and Biden 2024 and 2025, right? Just like you could feel the, like, I was, as he's talking, I'm almost rooting for him. Come on, you can get these words out. You can do it. Like, he's not in good shape now. I mean, that's just a function of age. I'm not taking anything away from the guy. Where will I be at the same age if I make it that long, right? But he's sending mixed signals in 2022, and then he's not actually fulfilling the things in a meaningful way for them to win, but saying, yes, they can prevail. It's going to cost them a lot. And it's just been slow walking, Aiden, and it was just painful to watch for the last few years. I'll leave this to your thoughts. What do you think about what you just saw there? Okay, has Russia ever been at war with you? And this is a map of Europe, and pretty much the only places that you see that that Russia has not been at war at Europe is what's that? Belarus, and then I guess that's the former Yugoslavia and Ireland, Iceland. Very few places in Europe that Russia's not been at war at. There's a reason that they're worried about Russia. Okay, finally, Darth Putin says the problem with appeasement is that eventually you run out of other people's countries. And then a rust bucket full of oil drifts on your coast. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Tell me what you think about this concept of codependency between the appeasers and the oppressors. Like, did that register with you? What do you think? Put it in the comments below. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.